How did it happen? And in this show, how did they not die because our bodies are electrical signals being sent millions of times per minute?
Sure.
But this show doesn't ever really... I feel like this first season was a setup for what the writer thinks is going to be a gangbuster second season of revealing all of these moves that he set up. I really wish they hadn't done it in 8 episodes.
Right.
I wish that I would have been okay with this being a slower burn. And I think that was my big problem, is that if this had been a more realistic, more gritty drama, I think that they had pieces in place that could have worked. The accents were horrible. I don't know why they decided to use those accents. I think that it's like so many things. Like I was watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine today, and they had on 2 characters that were supposed to be from Sweden, and their actual accents were god-awful.
Yeah.
You're like, just hire people who are actually from the place that they're from.
Sure.
There are enough people from New Hampshire, I'm sure, that you could hire to do voiceover.
Right.
Put a message out, and you get local actors to do it.
Look, I'm sure the Black Vault had
Oh,
by
God.
multiples less money behind it.
Oh, Black Vault, not
Yeah.
Black Tapes, which
Not
is what
Black
I'm thinking
Tapes.
of.
But, and even though I had some criticisms of Black Vault, and we talked about it, we didn't
Yeah.
do a full episode on it, but I brought it in the checking in. I wanted to listen every week. It was never maddening. There was just a couple voice actors I didn't think were great.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, man, when they wanted someone from Iceland, they got an actor from Iceland.
There you go.
When they wanted someone who was from Spain, they got an actress or a voice actor from Spain. When they wanted someone who was Finnish, they got someone who was Finnish.
We're in Los
And man,
Angeles.
it makes a huge difference. And the funny thing here is there is a scene where someone barges into Madeline's nerve center general store
Yes.
and says, sounding like they're from Reseda, we're from Boston. We don't have anything. Can you help us? And everyone who's a member of the cast from New Hampshire who sounds like, again, the most egregious
Southeast from the town.
100%. So the one guy from Boston has no Boston accent at all. And they're like, get out of here, you beantown
We're not giving you
jerk.
any insulin. Mm-hmm. You don't get any medicine.
The insulin scene. Oh, guys, I have so much to be critical of that I know when we're done, I'll be like, oh, I didn't say this. I didn't talk
There's
about
too
that.
much. And the thing is that I can't condemn it. It's not a 1-star for me. There are elements of it that I actually liked. I like the premise. I think that is an interesting idea. I just feel like this is a writer who is not either experienced enough to actually be able to wrangle this all together, or that he had a great idea, and then when he actually had to sit down and write it into 8 50-minute long episodes, he just started running out of steam and fell back on tropes. Because that's what happened for me. Is that this show felt like it fell into tropes.
Oh, this is an assemblage of tropes.
Yeah, I agree.
What's happening in the town? I mean, it makes no sense. She gets a call from someone who's the Rook or has some chess piece code name, and I'm thinking, okay. So if this cabal is having to organize roughly 10,000 people at a time that they know the name of or are bothering to call Madeline in Berlin, New Hampshire, to say, is everything in place? Have you done your part? Is insane. It would be, they'd be calling people all day long and it would never stop.
There'd be thousands of people calling all these tiny towns. And if they set it up that like Berlin was sitting on a huge resource of XYZ, whatever, natural gas, perhaps.
Right, that it had some importance nationally, right? We'd understand if maybe there was a czar in Chicago and a czar in New York, one in LA, and these are the nerve centers of social activity, of commerce in the United States. We get it. This just... everything made no sense.
If it was
and it
Fresno,
was two-dimensional. It was sure. That
I
makes
get
sense.
it because at least it has the 5 running through it, or the agriculture, or water. You know, one of the things they talk about in This Could Happen Here, was that the name of it? I always forget the actual.
It could happen here.
I just want to stop you and say Fresno does not have the 5.
No, has the 99. Has the 99.
Or is it Bakersfield?
Bakersfield does not either.
No, I guess I don't know where the
Doug,
5
am I
is.
right? That's the 99 in the East San Joaquin Valley. Yeah.
Well, just choke points of major freeways. How about that? Or like It Could Happen Here, where he talks about the water source, the aqueduct runs from Northern California to Southern California, and there's just a small contingent of people who are actually separatists. They want to separate from California because they're super red,
right?
And that they could just turn off the aqueducts essentially with a few well-placed explosives and starve or dry out, cause drought in all of San Francisco down. And like why they didn't do that in this show is it's mind-boggling to me. Why they couldn't have done at least a little bit of research and figure out why this town would have been so important and why the Air Force would have been flying a plane over it to be then I don't know. Was he shot down? Did he just crash of his own volition?
He does say that his. By the way, it was the only thing other than Remi Malek's performance, which I did really enjoy because I thought it was very naturalistic. It was my favorite part of the show was the first 3 minutes of airtime of episode 1 is simply the staticky communication between a pilot and air traffic control, at least military air traffic control. And he does say, I think that his power is down.
Right.
And he makes a reference to this is an unsafe spot. This is not a safe flyover. Right. And then he crashes into, it's actually, speaking of Jericho Mountain, which is in New Hampshire near Berlin.
And so I feel like
Berlin.
It's got to be. This show feels like a setup for season 2, and I just don't care anymore.
Well, I mean, if you do a really bad job with season 1, and because of time dilation, because of things that don't make sense, like people losing all hope or saying that there's cholera a day and a half into this. By the way, we also know you need stakes, and you get stakes by people getting in bad positions. You need to do that in a way that is clever and believable to your listener instead of having every single character make what I call like bad or B-movie decisions.
Right.
Where everything they do, you think, I would never do that. I'd never say that. You'd never go there. You'd never approach this way. And there's a lot of that happening to then get them into dire straits, which then leads to drama. And because it's so time dilated, because the accents are bad, because the narrative doesn't make sense to us, it doesn't feel like drama. It feels like melodrama. And melodrama is not good.
And it seems like he knew that the end of this season was going to be an escape to second season.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
You know, they needed an escape. And so it felt like that was like, we have to make sure all the pieces stay in one place until we can make that move at the end of this season.
I agree. I mean, I understand why he chose a small town to be too difficult.
Right. To be Chicago. Chicago would be impossible to write for and have a cast of 8 characters.
Right. But at the same time, you have to sit down and be like, but this plane then isn't going to fly with the length of wings I've given it and the weight of the fuselage. This plane won't fly.
Why didn't they have any planes?
Scott Conroy needed to sit down and say, well, if the only way I can do this is in a small enough town where I'm going to claim later that a wall is built around the town. I mean, again, even for the tiniest of American towns, a engineering project that would take everyone in town, I'm assuming far more resources than they have, and try building that wall with no electricity. And you're right, cultures have done it over hundreds of years.
Right.
Not over 2 or 3 months.
Well, the other thing is that I think because this was such a message piece and he wanted to reflect the Trump wall when he was writing it, that he just went, we got to throw a wall in there. Like, I'm writing a zombie movie right now. And one of the things you have to do in any zombie movie is make it so that it's hard for people to leave the place that they're at because of the zombies.
Sure.
And so I set mine in 1900 Nome, Alaska, around Nome, Alaska, kind of a conduit for, because in Alaska, it's really hard to move anywhere in 1900s. And it makes it so they can't just hop on a plane or hop on a train or get in a car and just drive away. And so, I understand why for this story,
it's hard to move in Alaska now.
It certainly is.
Anchorage has no roads in Anchorage. You either arrive,
you have to go by boat
via ocean or plane.
Right, and if it's frozen over, because a lot of the parts, the docks and the waters
coastal areas
just freeze over during the winter months, and you can't go by boat, and you're just stuck where you are until you can leave. Which is or back to the Iditarod, you can take a Huskies on a sled, and you can go over land, which is how they brought the
there
serum
just aren't
to
maintained roads,
other places to stop them from all dying out. So I get it's an interesting idea. And Remi Malek, I get why he'd want to be a part of this. I imagine it's actually probably pretty easy for them. He goes to a studio or records it from home, who knows where, over 10 or 12 or 20 hours.
I've heard many actors say it's the easy, if you can get voiceover work and it's paying, and they must have paid him. And again,
he's an executive producer. He's getting a portion of the
huge
profits.
Production. We know he's getting. I just don't know what kind of profits they're getting for this. But we know the Sonos people. Oh, by the way, guys.
Oh, it's sponsored.
Sorry, let's take a quick break.
Play the ad.
Hey, if you think this show sounds great on whatever listening device you're using right now, you should do what we've all done here and try the Sonos equipment. It's great. I can't think of the names of any of their products right now, but hey, look them up and then buy them because they're wonderful. And then if I did that 15 more times, that might sound like an episode of Blackout because, God damn it, they kept talking about Sonos.
And here's the question.
By the way, sure, it's a great product, but I don't know.
The question to you guys is, did you find it interesting that the writer and creator of the show was the one doing the ads for Sonos? Doug?
That was the point where you guys taught me how to use that fast forward button.
Right.
And
Well,
so
jumping ahead
that
of
is
the
what I
ads.
did.
You were in, kind of media marketing. I mean, you worked for a company. That's what they did. They placed products and so
Sure.
forth. What are your thoughts about that? It is the writer going, and if you think this sounds good, try it on Sonos. It gives you the deep, rich tones that are, very expensive sound design was meant to create. By the way, didn't like the sound design. Doug, before you answer, I have to jump into this. If you think, well, the one good thing about the show is this rich sound design, but this is what it sounds like when someone breaks the neck of a chicken. No, that wasn't a 4-inch thick alder branch. That was supposed to be a chicken neck. How can I take this seriously when that's the sound?
No, in New
That's just
Hampshire,
meant-
John, you don't know.
Those chickens
the
are
chickens
big.
are
They're
gigantic.
huge.
They
That
make
is
them
true.
bigger
Yeah.
in Texas
Well,
and New Hampshire.
Very
Everybody
good
knows
point,
that.
Brandon. Back to my question.
Well,
Sorry, Doug.
well, and just-
Again, that was
I
that
think-
bullshit we were talking about.
Yeah, and I think one of my first comments was I liked that it was kind of gritty and there wasn't a high overproduced sound quality
Right.
to it. I liked that about it. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting that that's what they were pushing about it. The fact that it was the writer producer that didn't even register with me.
Oh, okay. See, I thought it was really strange. And to me, it was one of two things. Either they couldn't contractually obligate Remi Malek to do the ad reads,
Right.
which is probably the most
Yeah.
reasonable because he'd probably be too expensive, or this guy really thinks that he's a big shot and is like, "Oh, I'm going to put my stamp on this by
well,
reading the ad copy."
To be a little kinder, maybe it's not big shot, but this is so much his baby. He believes in this project so much. He has no problem shilling for the project. There's also that possibility.
I mean, that's certainly true.
I mean, I don't think, obviously, with the huge amount of criticism that I've directed at this, I do not actually think it's good. And I think actually where it failed the most was in its dialogue and storytelling, which is the writing.
I mean, I feel like this is a guy who doesn't know how to write narrative. Scott Conroy, the writer, is worked a ton in politic writing.
Okay.
Writing think pieces about politics and writing long form pieces on politics.
Yeah, I was going to say, what kind of writing within the realm of politics did you find that he did? Was it journalistic writing? Was it speech writing? Or was it opinion pieces?
So the thing that I found was mostly reporting. He's a reporter for...
Okay, so it is journalistic.
Yeah,
right.
Real Clear Politics. He wrote a book called Vote First or Die, the New Hampshire primary.
Oh, interesting.
So I feel like this guy is...
Wow,
is
he's really kind of dedicated
deep
to...
into...
Yeah, he is.
And maybe he's from New Hampshire. I don't know.
Well, if he is, then it would raise a question that why, because we've now all heard his voice multiple times, is he is shilling. He's out there working it for Sonos. Didn't he hear these accents and go, you guys have to dial it back?
You would think.
This is absurd.
Although who knows how involved he was in any of the direction of the show. He also wrote a thing called Embeds, which apparently is about embedded journalists with military, which I have not listened to and probably will not.
Right.
So I mean,
okay, so this is his first pure creative narrative.
It
That,
seems
by the
like
way,
it's-
that makes complete sense to me.
Embeds might have been a...
No, you're right, it might have been.
narrative. I don't know.
All right, well, speaking of Alaska and speaking of narrative
Yeah.
and sound design and slow burn, yes, Brandon.
I wanted to jump in and talk about the podcast that I was going to reference in the Catching It and Checking.
Oh, me too. I was going to
Oh,
do
is
it.
it
So, no,
jumping
you
into?
please go first.
So I didn't mean to cut you off. I just
No,
want to
no,
move
go
on
ahead.
to the next segment.
Absolutely.
So We're Alive was very good.
Okay.
And it seemed like it was much more independently produced, and it had some really interesting characters. And the thing that I looked up is that all the people that were doing, like, there's a lady with a French accent. She's French.
Right.
There's a person with a strong Bronx accent. He's from the Bronx. They let these people actually talk with their real accents and hired actual voice actors, and it really shows. It doesn't feel like anything's put on. And I mean, so one of two things are true about Blackout. Either they hired people who don't know the accent, or it's a horrible accent that I don't like listening to. Right. And I can't. Either way, I hated it.
Yeah, I mean, again, if I had said, "Well, I spent 3 months in New Hampshire," and I can tell you categorically, this is not what people. But I haven't, so I don't know.
If it's a perfect accent and that is what they sound like, I never want to listen to them speak ever in my life.
Well, if they sound like Valerie Spencer's version of Madeline,
Right.
I don't ever want to get within 2 states
ever.
of New Hampshire.
But
yes,
Bernie's from Vermont, and I've listened to
Yes.
Bernie talk a lot. And New Hampshire and Vermont are next door to each other. He doesn't sound anything like any of the people on this podcast.
Look,
he sounded mostly like the guy from Boston who sounded like he was from Reseda.
right. There you go. Right.
But we're alive. Really good strong narrative that had characters making sense. It's about 3 people who are on a base. They're like reserves, or maybe they're actually active Marines. Anyway, and so the zombie apocalypse happens, and you follow these 3 people as they travel through town trying to get to a place that they think is safe.
Okay.
And